November 14th, 1961. New York City, the corner of 52nd Street and Broadway. It was nearly 1 in the morning, and the wind coming off the Hudson River felt like a knife made of ice. Under the flickering yellow light of a theater marquee, a 15-year-old boy named Leo was shivering in a coat that was 3 sizes too big and threadbare at the elbows. He was trying to sing "In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning," but his lips were blue, and his voice was shaking so hard the notes were falling apart before they even hit the air. In the cigar box at his feet, there were exactly 45 cents. And at home, in a cold walk-up apartment in Hell's Kitchen, his mother was waiting for the medicine that cost $4. People in mink coats and cashmere scarves walked past him, stepping over his shadow as if he were part of the dirty pavement. Someone laughed. A man in a tuxedo flicked a cigarette butt that landed on Leo's shoe. But Leo didn't stop singing, because he didn't have the luxury of stopping. Then, the heavy oak doors of the club behind him opened, and a silence fell over the street that was louder than the traffic. A man stepped out, adjusting the brim of a fedora, surrounded by the smell of expensive cologne and unfiltered tobacco. He wasn't just a man. He was the king of this city, and what he did next on that frozen sidewalk would become a secret legend in the history of show business. By the way, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? Leo Mancuso had lived his entire life in the shadow of the skyscrapers that promised a dream he couldn't afford. His father had died in the war when Leo was just a baby, leaving his mother, Maria, to scrub floors in the office buildings of Midtown. She worked 16 hours a day until her back gave out and her lungs grew weak. Now, the winter of 1961 had brought a bronchitis so severe that the doctor said without the expensive antibiotics, she might not see the spring. Leo had quit school 2 weeks ago. He had tried to get a job running sandwiches, hauling ice, shining shoes. But the city was full of hungry boys, and there wasn't enough work to go around. His only possession of value was his voice. His mother used to say he sounded like the radio, like the angels. But out here on the concrete, angels didn't make money. Noise did. Desperation did. That night, Leo had been singing for 3 hours straight. His throat felt like he had swallowed broken glass. The patrons of the exclusive nightclub, the Emerald Room, were starting to spill out as the late show ended. This was his chance. These people had pockets full of loose change that could save his mother's life. He straightened his back, took a deep breath of the freezing air, and tried to project. He launched into the chorus, trying to channel the smooth, effortless power of his idol, the man whose voice was playing on every jukebox in America. But Leo was starving. He was freezing, and he was terrified. The note cracked. It was an ugly, sharp sound that pierced the night air. A group of 3 men in heavy wool overcoats and silk scarves stopped in front of him. They smelled of gin and arrogance. One of them, a heavy-set man with a red face, laughed loudly. "Hey, kid," the man slurred, pointing a gloved finger at Leo. "You sound like a dying cat. Do us a favor and shut up, will you? We're trying to have a conversation here." Leo lowered his eyes, his face burning with shame. "I'm sorry, sir," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm just trying to... My mother is sick." "Oh, the sick mother routine," the man sneered, turning to his friends. "They all have a sick mother, don't they? Or a sick dog, or a sick parakeet." He reached into his pocket. Leo's heart jumped. Maybe, despite the cruelty, the man would give him a quarter. The man pulled out a handful of coins, pennies mostly, and threw them. But he didn't throw them into the cigar box. He threw them hard, right at Leo's chest. The copper coins stung as they hit him, scattering onto the wet pavement and rolling into the gutter. "Dance for it, Caruso," the man laughed. "Go chase him." Leo stood frozen. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run. but he needed that money. He fell to his knees, scrambling on the dirty, freezing sidewalk, trying to catch the pennies before they fell into the storm drain. The men laughed harder. One of them kicked the cigar box, sending the meager 45 cents skittering across the ice. "Look at him," the man said, lighting a cigar. "Pathetic. You don't belong on 52nd Street, kid. Go back to the slums." Leo was on his hands and knees, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging against his frozen cheeks. He reached for a dime that was stuck in a crack in the cement. His fingers were numb. He felt small. He felt invisible. He felt like his life was over before it had even begun. If you love stories about the hidden moments that define greatness, please subscribe for new stories. Just as the man raised his foot to nudge Leo over, the air shifted. The heavy iron doors of the Emerald Room swung open again. But this time the bouncers didn't just stand there. They stiffened. They moved aside with a mixture of fear and reverence. Out of the warmth of the club stepped a figure in a dark, immaculate trench coat, the collar turned up against the wind. He was flanked by 2 other men, but nobody looked at them. All eyes were on the man in the center. He had a cigarette dangling loosely from his lips, and his eyes, those famous, piercing blue eyes, were scanning the street with the precision of a hawk. Frank Sinatra had just finished a 2-hour set. He was tired. He was dealing with a cold that he'd been hiding from the audience with whiskey and sheer willpower. He was in a foul mood. The press had been hounding him about his engagement, about his politics, about his friends. He just wanted to get into his limousine and disappear. But as he stepped onto the curb, he saw the commotion. He saw the heavy-set man laughing. He saw the boy on his knees in the slush, frantically trying to pick up pennies. Frank stopped. The entourage stopped. The world seemed to stop. The heavy-set man, realizing someone was behind him, turned around, ready to tell them to get lost, too. The words died in his throat. He looked at the face of the man standing 5 feet away, and the color drained from his cheeks. Frank didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, letting the smoke curl up from his cigarette, staring at the man with a look that could freeze a volcano. The silence stretched, heavy and terrifying. Then, Frank took the cigarette from his mouth and flicked it into the gutter. He took 1 step forward. His voice was low, gritty, the voice of a man who owned the night. "You having fun?" Frank asked. It wasn't a question. It was a threat. The man stammered. "Mr. Sinatra, we were just... This kid, he was bothering us, Frank. He was making a racket." Frank tilted his head slightly. He looked down at Leo, who was still on his knees, clutching a muddy dime, looking up in disbelief. Frank looked back at the man. "He was bothering you," Frank repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "So you thought you'd throw money at him like he's an animal?" "It was a joke, Frank. Just a joke," the man said, sweating now despite the cold. Frank walked right up to the man, invading his personal space. Frank wasn't the tallest man in the world, but in that moment he looked 10 feet tall. He poked a finger into the man's silk lapel. "You think humiliation is funny?" Frank whispered, but everyone on the block heard it. "Let me tell you something, pal. That kid has more guts in his pinky finger than you have in your whole soft, miserable life. He's out here working. What do you do besides inherit your daddy's money and pick on children?" The man was trembling now. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sinatra. I didn't mean—" "Get out of here!" Frank snapped. The sudden volume made the man jump. "Before I lose my temper. And trust me, you don't want to see me lose my temper." The 3 men didn't wait. They practically ran down Broadway, disappearing into the night like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Frank watched them go, his jaw set tight. Then, the tension left his shoulders. He turned back to the sidewalk. He looked down at Leo. The boy was terrified. He was looking at Frank Sinatra, the man whose poster was taped to his bedroom wall, the man his mother listened to while she cried over bills. Frank didn't look like a star now. He looked like a father. He looked like a guy from Hoboken. Frank extended a hand. A hand wearing a gold pinky ring, manicured and strong. "Get up, kid," Frank said gently. "The ground is for pavements, not for people." Leo reached out. Frank gripped his hand and pulled him, up with surprising strength. He didn't let go immediately. He held Leo's hand, looking at the red, frozen knuckles. "You're freezing," Frank said. He didn't wait for an answer. He began to unbutton his heavy trench coat. "No, Mr. Sinatra, please," Leo gasped, finding his voice. "I'm okay. I'm fine." "Quiet," Frank muttered. He took off the coat, a custom-tailored cashmere piece that probably cost more than Leo's apartment building, and draped it over the boy's shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of success. "Put that on. You're turning blue." Frank was now standing in just his tuxedo suit in the freezing wind, but he didn't seem to feel the cold. He looked at the cigar box, then at the scattered pennies. "I heard you singing before those clowns interrupted," Frank said, lighting another cigarette. "You were singing 'Wee Small Hours.' That's a hard song. Big song for a little guy." Leo looked down at his shoes. "I know. I messed it up. My voice, it cracked." Frank chuckled softly, a warm, rasping sound. "Everybody's voice cracks, kid. Even mine, especially mine. It's not about hitting the note. It's about why you're singing it. Who are you singing for?" "My mom," Leo blurted out. "She's sick. She needs medicine. I need $4. Frank's face softened. A shadow of an old pain passed through his eyes. He knew what it was like to be a hungry Italian kid with a mother he adored, trying to sing his way out of a dark corner. $4, Frank repeated softly. He looked at the crowd that had gathered. The doormen, the other patrons, the people passing by had all stopped to watch. A small circle had formed around them. Frank looked at Leo. "You got an instrument, kid?" Just me," Leo said. "That's the only instrument that matters," Frank said. He turned to the crowd. "You folks in a rush? Or do you have a minute?" Nobody moved. Nobody was going anywhere. Frank turned back to Leo. "We're gonna do this right. You and me. A duet. You know Silent Night?" Leo nodded, his eyes wide. "Yes, sir, since I was a baby." "Good," Frank said. He put a hand on Leo's shoulder, gripping it firmly. "Now listen to me. Forget the cold. Forget those idiots. Forget the money. It's just you, me, and your mother. She's listening, okay? Sing it to her." Frank nodded to the doorman, who quickly ran inside and shouted something to the band leader. A moment later, a muted trumpet player appeared at the door, catching Frank's eye. Frank just nodded and tapped a tempo on his leg. Frank started. His voice was low, intimate, like hot chocolate on a cold night. Silent night, holy night. He sang the first line, then nodded at Leo. Leo opened his mouth. He was wearing Frank Sinatra's coat. Frank Sinatra was standing next to him, his hand on his shoulder. The fear vanished. The cold vanished. Leo closed his eyes and sang. "All is calm. All is bright." It wasn't perfect. It was raw. It was the voice of a boy who had seen too much pain too soon. But it was pure. It soared up into the neon lights of Broadway. Frank smiled. He came in for the harmony. Their voices blended, the rich, baritone velvet of the master and the high, clear, desperate soprano of the boy. They stood on that dirty corner, surrounded by steam vents and traffic noise, and created a cathedral made of sound. People were crying. Women in fur coats were dabbing their eyes. The bouncers, tough men who had seen everything, were staring at their shoes. For 3 minutes, New York City wasn't a hard place. It was a holy place. When the last note faded, hanging in the frosty air, there was total silence. Then, applause broke out. It started slow, then grew into a roar. People were cheering like they were inside Carnegie Hall. Leo looked up at Frank. Frank wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at Leo. He reached out and squeezed the boy's shoulder again. "You got heart, kid," Frank said, "and you can't teach heart." Frank reached into his tuxedo pocket. He pulled out a money clip. It was thick with bills. He didn't count it. He took the whole stack, hundreds of dollars, and shoved it into the pocket of the trench coat Leo was wearing. "Take this," Frank said. "Get your mother the best doctor in the city, not just the medicine. The doctor. You understand?" Leo was sobbing now. He tried to take the coat off to give it back. "Mr. Sinatra, I can't. This is too much." Frank stopped him. He pulled the lapels of the coat tighter around the boy's neck. "Keep the coat," Frank said firmly. "You'll grow into it. And when you look at it, you remember tonight. You remember that nobody has the right to make you feel small." Frank turned to his entourage. "Let's go." He started walking toward his limousine. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. But before he got into the car, he stopped and turned back one last time. "Hey, kid," Frank yelled. Leo wiped his eyes. "Yes, Mr. Sinatra?" "Don't let me catch you singing on the street again." Frank pointed a finger, a half smile on his face. "Next time I hear you, I want to pay for a ticket to see you. Deal?" "Deal," Leo shouted back. Frank winked, ducked into the car, and was gone. Leo ran all the way home. He didn't feel the ground beneath his feet. He burst into the apartment, waking his mother. When he emptied the pockets of the coat, there was nearly $5,000 in cash. He got her the medicine. He got her the best specialist at Mount Sinai Hospital. She recovered. They moved out of Hell's Kitchen to a decent apartment in Queens. Leo finished school. But the story doesn't end there. If you want to know what happened to the boy in the coat, make sure to subscribe for new stories right now, because the legacy of that night went further than anyone expected. Leo didn't become a famous singer. He tried for a few years, singing in small clubs, wearing that trench coat even when it was warm. But he realized something. His gift wasn't being on stage. His gift was recognizing the pain in others, the same way Frank had recognized it in him. In 1975, Leo Mancuso opened a small community center in the Bronx called The Voice. It was a place for runaway kids, for teenagers who had been kicked out of their homes, for young musicians who had nowhere to practice. He used the last of the money Frank had given him to put the down payment on the building. Over the next 30 years, Leo saved thousands of kids. He gave them food. He gave them music lessons. But mostly, he gave them dignity. There was a rule in Leo's center. If a kid was being bullied, if a kid was being mocked for trying to learn an instrument, everything stopped. Leo would walk over, a man now in his 50s, still wearing a fedora, and he would tell them the story. He would tell them about the cold night in 1961. He would tell them about the man with the blue eyes. "Frank didn't save me because I was a great singer," Leo would tell the kids. "He saved me because he saw a human being trying to survive. He taught me that when you have power, when you have a voice, your job isn't to be louder than everyone else. Your job is to sing with the ones who can't get the notes out." Leo passed away in 2008. At his funeral, there were no paparazzi. But the church was packed. Hundreds of men and women, former students, people whose lives he had touched, filled the pews. And in the front row, draped over Leo's casket, was a vintage black cashmere trench coat. It was worn at the elbows, and the lining was faded, but it was still beautiful. One of Leo's former students, now a successful jazz musician, stood up to speak. He told the congregation a story Leo had told him privately. Years after that night, in the late 80s, Leo had gone to a Sinatra concert at Radio City Music Hall. He sat in the back row. He didn't try to go backstage. He didn't try to meet the star. He just wanted to listen. Toward the end of the show, Frank sat on a stool, a drink in his hand. He was older now, his hair gray, his voice deeper, more gravelly. He started talking to the audience about New York, about the old days. "You know," Frank said into the microphone, looking out into the darkness of the hall, "I've sung with the best, Count Basie, Ella, Dino. But the best duet I ever sang was on a street corner on 52nd Street with a kid who was freezing to death." The audience was silent. "I don't know where that kid is today," Frank said softly, "but I hope he's warm. I hope he kept the coat." In the back row, Leo wept silently. Frank Sinatra was known for his temper, his mob ties, his arrogance. But the real Frank Sinatra was the man who stopped on a cold night when he didn't have to. The man who saw himself in a shivering boy and decided to change the script. It's easy to be kind when everyone is watching and the cameras are rolling. It's easy to give money when you have too much of it. But to stop, to kneel down in the dirt, to put your own coat on a stranger's shoulders and say, "I see you," that is a different kind of greatness. We all have a moment where we are the boy on the corner, feeling like the world is laughing at us. And we all have a moment where we can be the man in the trench coat. You don't need to be Frank Sinatra. You don't need $1 million. You just need to stop, look, and listen. So the next time you see someone struggling to get the notes out, someone shivering in the cold of their own life, don't laugh. Don't walk away. Remember 52nd Street. Remember the silence before the song. And remember that sometimes a single act of kindness can echo for a lifetime, louder than any hit record ever could. Thank you for watching this story. If you believe in the power of second chances, please subscribe for new stories. I'll see you in the next one.